Hi guys, and welcome to the first activity of Biological Sciences for Year 10. What we're going to be looking at here is we're just going to do a very quick breakdown as to what determines life, and what sort of makes you up, what makes me up, what makes a tree, a bush, an animal, a tiger, piece of bacteria. What makes them up? What decides basically you're going to be this and you're going to be that, and then we'll sort of break down the whole program as we go through the genetics unit and just sort of try and identify what's going on. Well, basically what we're going to do, we're going to run through a few terms and try and describe them, and hopefully we can pull it all together. Now, when you look around the world, when you look around your classroom, when you look around anything really, every single living organism is basically made up of a few very, very small chemical molecules. Now, those chemical molecules we know as DNA. And that DNA basically is the building blocks behind all of the variety that we see. Now, what you've got to understand is that the variety which we see around us is important. Every single organism has basically adapted as time has gone on, as the world has existed. Each of those organisms basically have adapted to a specific type of environment. We live on the surface of the planet. We can't go into the water. We can swim in the water, but we can't hold our breath. We have adapted to living on land, whereas a fish has adapted to living on in the water. What happened? What was the cause of that adaptation? What was the cause behind those changes? How did those changes come about? This is what scientists are trying to unravel. Now, we've only just sort of nipped the tip of the iceberg, I suppose, when it comes to this this idea. We've mapped the human genome. We've basically looked inside the cell and we've broken it up, and we've sort of worked out how. I always look at the human genome as a set of encyclopedias, and we've got 23 encyclopedias, and inside each encyclopedia we've got pages, and the pages are split up into chapters, and then the chapters each has its own individual page with a load of writing on it. And as we go through it, I'll sort of explain how I understand that encyclopedia, how I try and interpret what's going on. But fundamentally what's happening, you've got 23 of these encyclopedias, and each organism has a different number of encyclopedias. So we've got 23 encyclopedias. That basically is the chromosomes. So you've got 23 chromosomes, 23 pairs of chromosomes. And as I say, if I open up one volume, I basically have chapters. Those are the genes. And in those chapters, I've then got these pages, and these pages have got letters on them. That's the genetic code. The letters are made up of four different bases, and we'll talk about that later on. So when I say scientists have mapped the human genome, what we've got is we've basically started off with 23 blank encyclopedias. What scientists have done is put all the letters on the pages. That's it. No idea what it means, but they put it on. Research now is going to be pushing it to try and work out, what do all those pages mean? How does it work? How do they put all this together to give us the variety? Okay. Now, in class, we will have done an activity where we would have looked at, what is it that makes up the perfect human being? And of course, you'll find out that it's all down to the individual, because beauty in the eye of the beholder, I suppose, is the way of looking at it. But the thing is, every single one of us is different. Okay. We've all got different bits of information. Only people who have got the same information are identical twins. Okay, but basically we all have different information. We come from the same stock, but we all have different information, and we have changed just very, very slightly. And as a result, that's allowed us to adapt to the environment. Okay, so that's what I mean when we say, where does life come from? Where does all these things originate from? This is what we're going to be looking at. Now, there are a few terms that we need to firstly understand, And I'll quickly define these terms because as we go on through our talk and through these videos, I'll be using those terms, and it's really important that you understand what we're talking about. Well, firstly, genetics is the study of all those traits. All that, where does, in fact, I've got brown hair. Why is that? My boys both have blonde hair. Why is that? I got brown hair. My wife's got blonde hair. Why have they got blonde hair? So, we'll be looking at that study. And, we will keep it very, very simple. For example, eye colour. I've got brown eyes. My boy's got blue eyes. Why does that happen? Okay. Why is it that different people can have different coloured eyes? One eye is different colour to something else. Why is it we get this variety of different colours? Genetics hopefully answers those questions. DNA. We'll have to look at DNA. That's the next unit. But DNA basically is the building block behind those characteristics. How does it do that? What's it made of? What does it look like? And when we talk about the human genome, well, basically what we're talking about is all the DNA put end to end and being able to read it all. Okay, so you need to understand that DNA is actually in every single cell. Okay, every single cell except for red blood cells. Red blood cells started off with a nucleus and then it disappeared. Okay, it doesn't have it anymore. What's a gene? We talk about gene. Well, genetics is the study of hereditary traits or characteristics. A gene is a single trait, a single characteristic. Eye colour is a gene. Hair colour is a gene. Skin colour is down to a gene. Actually, you'll find it's probably down to hundreds, thousands of genes all working together. And the mishmash of putting those all together basically will determine what's going to happen. So a gene is a small piece of genetic material which codes for a specific characteristic. That characteristic could be the whole thing, or it could just be one little portion of an overall characteristic. What's a chromosome? Well, basically a chromosome, of which I said we've got 23 pairs in our cells, basically is each of the encyclopedias. It's got a huge number of genes all put together end to end. Okay? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We look at mitosis. Mitosis, as we say, is a form of cellular division, generally used for growth and repair. When you think about the first cell that we have, which is called the zygote, when the sperm and the egg come together, basically they produce that first cell, which is the zygote. It undergoes cellular division. Every single cell is identical to that initial cell at the start, okay, before it starts to specialize. So what happens is it splits again, splits again, splits again. You get this bundle of cell. This is what we call growth. Okay, so these cells keep growing, but they've all got the same individual genetic identity. So basically that's what we call mitosis. Now the opposite of mitosis is meiosis. Now this only happens in sex cells, okay? Your sperm and your egg, or in plants and flowering plants, it would be the form of pollen and the egg. And what they have to do is we've got to make sure that the genetic material is always the same. We have 23 pairs. Okay, so we must always have 23 pairs. If you're deficient in those 23 pairs, there's a problem. So the pairs come from the fact that a sperm and an egg, a pollen and the egg, when those cells come together, they only have half the number of genetic material. Okay, so we get half the number of genetic material. When we put them together, we get a full complement of genetic material. So as a result, meiosis is very, very important in making sure that you only end up with cells which have half the complement of chromosomes. Okay, so basically that runs through just some very key genetic terms which we can look at. What I want you to understand is basically look around you. Every single thing that we have, all of the changes that we have is down to genetics. This is what scientists believe. It's down to genetics. It's down to what's inside of you, what's the information, and then that organism then has the ability to adapt to its environment using the information which it's got. Okay, it's sort of a genetic survival instinct. And we'll look at how all that comes together. All right, well, I hope you found that interesting. It's probably the first little introduction into where we're going. I look forward to meeting you again. And we'll start really getting into the nuts and bolts as to how all this comes about. So thank you for watching, and join me again.